Okay, good evening, everyone, and let me welcome you to this third day of this 8th International Garifuna Conference under the theme Celebrating 20 Years of the UNESCO Declaration, a masterpiece of the intangible heritage of mankind, living the Garifuna heritage and culture after 224 years. This is day 3, our final day, and this evening promises to be a very productive one. And we invite you to, as usual, um, sit back and relax and enjoy the presentations. And of course, you could put your questions in the chat, and we'll be happy to respond at an appropriate time. Before we begin in earnest, I wish to invite our dear brother to delight our hearts with some live music, after which we will proceed with this evening's program. I welcome you all, those excellencies, friends from the continents, island peoples. We invite you and welcome you one and all. It's my pleasure now to invite Brother Adrian Martinez to delight our hearts with some music. Brother Adrian. Thank you very much, Brother Martinez, for that lovely rendition. And of course, we appreciate your contribution to this conference. I'm sure at least before the evening is concluded, we will have some more. So thank you very much. We want to
Yes.
okay. So we want to move right into our program for this evening. This is the third day, or the third evening, and of course we have a very interesting evening lined up in terms of presentations, and we indulge your usual patience and engagement, particularly on the chat. We are live on Facebook, and so you could on the Garifuna Heritage Foundation's page, and we invite you to share, if you're able to, with friends and colleagues and family across the globe. I want to introduce my colleagues who will be sharing this duty this evening with me. Of course, you know Vanessa de Mission. She is the director of Alliance Française here in Kingston, and she has been involved in the cultural landscape of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the last couple of years since she's been residing here and doing important work. Of course, we have also this evening sharing this duty with me, Sister Renetta Peters Morris, who is a doctoral student at the Open Campus and a senior public servant. I now wish to invite Sister Renetta to introduce and present our speakers for this first session. The topic is retrieval and inclusion in the Garifuna culture. Renetta Peters.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, Ronnie, for your introduction. I will now begin by introducing the first speaker, the first of three speakers, actually. So the first speaker is Cynthia Ellis. Cynthia Ellis is a community advocate who works to promote sustainable development by building on the achievements of previous generations for future generations. She has worked as an activist on women's issues in Belize. As the founder and director of the Belize Rural Women's Association, also in Jamaica as an advisor to the Prime Minister, and in other parts of the Caribbean. Recently, as a leader in the organization Garifuna Nation. She has helped to organize events to shed light on economic and women's issues in the international Garifuna community. Speaker number one, Cynthia Ellis. Speaker number two, Joel Wainwright. Joel Wainwright is a professor in the Department of Geography at the Ohio State University in the USA, where he studies political economy and environmental politics. He's an author of Decolonizing Development, Geopiracy, and also Climate Leviathan. Speaker number two, Joel Wainwright. Speaker number three in this presentation is Rachel Brunot. Rachel Brunot is an undergraduate student studying geography and international development at the Ohio State University in the United States of America. Since 2019, she has been working with Sandy Beach Women's Cooperative to aid in creating a cultural heritage museum, and with Cynthia Ellis to complete a memoir on women's organizing. This work will also inform her undergraduate thesis on the role of Garifuna women's activism in the Belizean women's movement. Speaker number three, Rachel Brunot.
Thank you very much, Sister Renetta. We now invite the speakers to make their presentations with the allotted time. And I'm sure at the end of the presentation, at the end of this evening, we will have questions for you. So please go right ahead.
Yes, my name is Cynthia Ellis, and it's a privilege and an honor to share with you from the south of Belize, from Paine, Punta Gorda, the Dabuyeba in Barranco, which is where I get my strength and knowledge for sharing today. I am the daughter of Godsman Celestino Ellis and Ethel Ellis, and I stand on the shoulders of those ancestors who have come long before me. And I share this evening as a mother of 5 children and 17 grandchildren and counting. And I do what I do and continue moving forward through the grace and the spirit of our ancestors who guide and direct me and guide and direct us. I want to present Guzman Celestino Ellis. I want to present Regina Martinez, who was one of the movers and shakers and organizers of women in Belize, and also a mother of 14 children and several grandchildren. I want to present Mr. Francis Lewis, who just transitioned a few weeks ago, who was the bedrock and one of the shoulders on which we stand in this mobilization and organization. I want to present all my brothers and my sisters, and especially Zoila Ellis Brown, who stays there in Urume, my sister. I love all of them. It would not be possible for me to share this evening without the love, the support, the encouragement, the dynamism, and the guidance of these people. And my team this evening, Rachel and Joel, Dr. Joel Wainwright, are part of this process, of this journey, of which the spirit of the theme is building bridges and making connections, the basis on which our ancestors cleared the path and moved in uncharted waters to make it possible. So the clarion call for me and for us in this celebration of UNESCO is to make the intangible tangible. And therefore the sharing of the Sandy Beach experience is based on making the tangible to inspire not only women in Belize or women in the Caribbean, but women and people in the world to stand up and take the rightful position of who we are and what we have to offer as a gift to humanity. So I will invite Rachel at this point to share some slides. This is not just a story about women who are the first women's cooperative in Belize. This is our story, your story, my story of how in the midst of adversity and genocide, we have overcome and we are overcoming and we will continue to overcome. So Rachel, I would like to invite you. Rachel is a student, as you heard, we've been working together along with Dr. Joel in capturing the story, because it's in understanding the essence of the story that we will get direction on the way forward. Rachel, please share our slides and what we've put together. And then once you complete, then I will summarize and ask Dr. Joel if he has any comments, and we will invite questions, because the strength of Garifuna Duo is inclusiveness and interaction. So I'm not here to make a speech, but to really charge all of us to move forward as a gift to humanity in a tangible way.
All right, thank you so much for those introductory remarks. And now I will be sharing some slides with you all to present on a paper which has been the result of the work of all 3 of these co-authors. And I'll be giving the presentation. And I am going to turn off my video, unfortunately, because my internet connection is just not quite strong enough. So yes, we are presenting on the cultural politics of Garifuna heritage through a case study of Sandy Beach in Hopkins, Belize. When UNESCO designated Garifuna language, dance, and music as intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2001, it formally recognized what most people already knew. that the culture and history of the Garifuna are unique, important, and worthy of recognition and preservation efforts. Yet, the preservation of cultural heritage raises some complex social and political questions. What forms of cultural heritage should receive emphasis for preservation? Who has the authority to shape or define the narratives of heritage projects? Who should benefit from specific cultural heritage initiatives, and how can we act to ensure that they receive those benefits? These questions have been taken up in the robust literature on the politics of cultural heritage. For instance, the authors Tammy Blumenfield and Christiana Panella both problematize the oversimplification of cultural heritage as strictly the physical outputs of a culture. For instance, the food, outfit, and artifacts. Instead, as the author Laura Jane Smith argues, physical sites and artifacts can serve as tangible representations that evoke the memory and recognition of the history and culture that created them. Smith further asserts that discussions about cultural heritage in the context of the particular history and needs of a group are important in creating a politics of recognition with material consequences for equity and justice. In our presentation, we aim to contribute to this discussion by fleshing out the politics governing both physical and intangible cultural heritage, using a case study from Belize, where these questions involve those living in Belize's Garifuna communities, Garifuna people living in Belize City or abroad, the role of the government, the role of gender and age, and more. So the Sandy Beach Women's Cooperative was first created in 1980 as the first women's cooperative in Belize. The women of the cooperative created the first restaurant and guest house in Hopkins Village. Their idea was to generate revenue for women in an equitable fashion by catering to tourists and visitors to Hopkins. Around the same time, the women's movement in Belize arose in part from the United Nations Decade for Women and from Belize's independence in 1981. Through the convergence of these two events, women in Belize began to realize that women's issues should no longer be submerged by the question of national liberation. The women's movement in Belize began in earnest following the 1983 International Women's Day celebration, where people from all walks of life organized in Belize City to draw attention to the difficulties they faced, their dreams, and their ambitions as women in Belize. The Garifuna people are no strangers to adversity, and Garifuna women have faced much of the trauma of assault and genocide, often by buffering men targeted by systematic violence. Therefore, Garifuna women have experienced the women's movement from the trajectory of a people that existed in the Caribbean before the Europeans, a people who are defined from a different language and narrative that communicates through drums, food, song, dance, and music in a way that naturally defies aggression and oppression. Many Garifuna women, including my co-author, Cynthia, were pioneers of the women's movement. In this context of increased awareness and recognition of women's goals, the women of Sandy Beach became determined to generate their own source of income through cooperative labor, equivalent to the farming and fishing cooperatives available to the Garifuna men of Hopkins. Both Hopkins and the cooperative itself have changed a great deal since 1980. Hopkins is now home to many hotels and restaurants, including a number that were built with foreign capital or by foreigners who have become residents of the village. Additionally, a large luxury resort complex has been built just to the south of the village. All of these factors have brought intense competition for tourist dollars. Since losing their monopoly on service provision, Sandy Beach has unfortunately seen their market share dwindle. In the 2 years prior to COVID-19, they had very little tourist income. And since the pandemic began, tourism has collapsed and they have seen essentially no business. In 2018, the cooperative devised a plan to address the competition. The women decided to create a cultural heritage museum on their site, a place that would draw tourists and visitors who are staying at other hotels or resorts, so that the women could charge an entry fee and serve a meal. The site of the museum would take advantage of the association of the place with a key event in Garifuna history, the recording of the celebrated album Watina by Andy Palacio and the Garifuna Collective, recorded on site at Sandy Beach in 2001. And this does include the amazing song that we opened the conference with today. The museum, which would be created in one of the buildings remaining from the time of the recording sessions, would feature different exhibits on Garifuna culture, demonstrations of Garifuna cooking, music, and so on. The museum is tentatively titled House of Watina and would therefore contribute to the historical memory of the Garifuna people, the community of Hopkins, as well as the historical importance of the cooperative, while raising funds for the women whose labors make it up. The three co-authors of this paper have all been involved in this process in different ways. Without going into too many details, suffice to say that none of us hold objective or neutral views on this topic. We all want to see the museum created. However, we would like to use this space to share some candid and critical self-reflections on the process of creating House of Watina at Sandy Beach. Our central claim is that the process of imagining and creating the museum raises contentious issues of cultural politics. For the scope of this paper, we will discuss two. First, we consider the politics of migration and tourism. And second, we look at the transnational character of Garifuna activism. The first contentious dynamic concerns labor power, migration, and tourism. Among the various social factors at play in Sandy Beach's museum project, one that stands out is generational. The Garifuna women who started Sandy Beach are today in their 60s and 70s. Young Garifuna women now have greater access to jobs domestically in the tourism industry, as well as opportunities to pursue higher education or other economic initiatives abroad. As we noted, competition has grown fast since the 1980s. When the cooperative was founded, it was one of the only ways for Garifuna women in the area to generate their own income. By the 2010s, multiple resorts, restaurants, hostels, and other tourism businesses offered employment to the Garifuna women from Hopkins. Most of these alternatives were able to promise higher or more regular pay than Sandy Beach could provide. Competition for labor in the tourism industry is not the only factor contributing to the difficulty that Sandy Beach, as well as a wider movement of Garifuna activism, faces in recruiting young members. Many young Belizeans, especially young Garifuna people, leave the country to attend university abroad or to seek out other economic opportunities. While some do return after receiving their education, many instead opt to send remittances to family members or maintain property locally so that they can come back and visit. Sandy Beach's members believe the museum could help the cooperative attract new members. A successful museum could generate more tourist traffic to help Sandy Beach pay more competitive wages, allowing the cooperative to hire looking for employment related to Garifuna heritage. Additionally, it will allow Garifuna people in the community to benefit from the economic value of Garifuna culture rather than the resort owners. Of course, even with a successful museum, Sandy Beach will still face the difficulties of a globalized resort-centered tourism economy. The next dynamic that we looked at is the role of local and transnational actors. The transnational nature of the Garifuna Nation plays an important role in the support and recognition of Sandy Beach's museum project. Many members of the Garifuna diaspora feel strongly about maintaining what Dr. Joseph Palacio calls the nation across borders by remaining connected to Garifuna culture and ancestral lands in Central America. At the same time, Garifuna people residing locally also have immediate concerns about land access, living conditions, and local politics. This creates a difference in priorities between those Garifuna who are still situated in Central America on the Garifuna ancestral lands, such as Sandy Beach, and those who no longer reside in the area, though they may still have local family members or property. Sandy Beach's museum creation project has generated support from both international and local actors, including both Garifuna and non-Garifuna people. However, here we focus mainly on the role of the transnational Garifuna community and the potential benefits and challenges this relationship presents. The international Garifuna community undoubtedly bears a role in the sustenance of Garifuna cultural heritage at home through their financial resources and organizing capacity. Through the organizing efforts of the international Garifuna community, Sandy Beach has gained a platform for recognition for their work. Recently, the president of Sandy Beach spoke about their work as a cooperative at the Garifuna Nation Conference in November on women's issues. This international network has expressed support for the museum project as it serves their larger goal of increased recognition of Garifuna cultural heritage within Belize. Additionally, Sandy Beach's location on ancestral Garifuna lands and their recent move to purchase the land their site occupies is a small step towards securing ancestral lands to the Garifuna people, which is another major goal of the international Garifuna community, as the other presentations and discussions in this conference have demonstrated. The organizing capacity and financial resources of this international network are potentially useful to Sandy Beach's museum project, as well as to other local efforts at preserving Garifuna history. So far, the funding secured for this project has come mainly from the US-based organization Self-Development of the People, and this grant was acquired with assistance from the co-authors of this paper, as well as the cooperative department in the government of Belize. While the international connections undoubtedly provide benefits to Sandy Beach, there is also reason for the women to remain cautious in order to ensure that their goals for themselves and for the future of the cooperative remain the priority, rather than the broader goals of cultural recognition and land sovereignty. The role that women of Sandy Beach play for the transnational Garifuna community is somewhat less tangible. Connections to local organizations like Sandy Beach are necessary to ground international appeals to Garifuna activism around land rights and cultural recognition. Sandy Beach provides a focal point for Garifuna activism. Their museum contributes to the goal of building a transnational movement of Garifuna people. However, in order for this relationship to succeed, the International Garifuna Network needs to devote a significant effort into strengthening their connections with local actors. The COVID-19 pandemic further complicates the situation as international and local travel have been severely reduced. There are numerous Garifuna groups that claim to represent the Garifuna nationally and internationally. Yet, in places like Hopkins, the rootedness of these organizations in the community tends to be thin. The challenge in attempting to build a Garifuna movement without the mutual commitment of both local and international actors is that increased recognition and other achievements of the international community will not translate into material benefits for Garifuna people living in Belize. In conclusion, Sandy Beach's historical significance in the women's movement, as well as their work to involve new members in the context of the tourism labor market and their negotiation of the transnational network of Garifuna activists through the context of creating a museum, centers the cooperative as an important case study in the cultural politics of Garifuna heritage. The Sandy Beach Women's Cooperative serves as an example for other Garifuna women and their communities to address issues of land, food sovereignty, and the environment in a manner that validates the Indigenous way of being. Sandy Beach is an important site in the history of Belize as one of the remaining tangible outcomes of the women's movement. In building a museum, they are contributing to the memory of the Garifuna people, as well as the recognition of the important role that women have played in the history of Belize. Now, that is all for my portion of the presentation, and I would like to turn it back over to Miss Cynthia for some concluding remarks. And to accompany her is a lovely photo of her at a coral reef.
Yes, thank you, Rachel and Joel. The challenges that we face in summary in all of this is going back to the origins of our ancestors, where we begin to coordinate and cooperate with people from all walks of life around the world, where we step into uncharted waters the way our ancestors did many years ago, where we declared ourselves a nation, where we now are challenged to align ourselves with existing nations, where our ancestors had the tenacity and the courage with less resources than we do to claim space. So land is not just becoming a place that is physical. Property is not just physical ownership of property. It is a sense and awareness of self. It is a sense of consciousness where we can step into strategizing intentionally and developing a succession plan moving forward so that COVID-19 becomes an opportunity and not a blockage, where we begin to take hold of technology. Congratulating the organizers of this conference to push us beyond the beyond, that we now are able to take hold of technology. And Sandy Beach and groups like this throughout the world are able to communicate. And that is why I intentionally presence myself in the Dabuyeba in Barranco, which is one of the largest in Central America, superseding the Dabuyeba, which was in La Buga, which was built as a result of the UNESCO declaration. We are now open for comments or questions. I don't know if Dr. Joel has any questions or comments.
Thank you, Cynthia. Sure, I'll just make a brief remark, and thanks to Rachel and Cynthia for the wonderful presentation. Briefly, I would first just like to acknowledge the presence of Ms. Merlene Castillo, the current chair of the Sandy Beach Women's Cooperative, who has been really the guiding light of this project from the start, and who is a tremendously powerful woman, as many of you will know, and who has been struggling against very difficult circumstances to maintain the cooperative, but it has succeeded. The cooperative is still there. And if I could add, perhaps, since I have the floor, I'll perhaps add one or two brief remarks. First, I'll just say that I think when we reflect back on the time period immediately preceding the recording of the extraordinary album Watina, which needs no introduction here, it's hard not to recognize that Andy and the other members of the Garifuna collective knew what they were doing when they decided to move as a group to Sandy Beach in Hopkins. They recognized that there were many brilliant musicians in the Garifuna community, not only in Belize, but also in Honduras and Guatemala. But to record an album like Watina, they would have to come together someplace, and organize themselves, and live together, and struggle together through music to realize their conception of the world. The reason that album is so brilliant is not just because the musicians as individuals were good. We know that. It was because of the way they were able to unify in the context of that particular place to express something of Garifuna Duo. So there's a very clear relationship then between the recording and the celebrated album and the place. Well, the album won all these great awards, as we know. World Music Album of the Year, one of the all-time greatest albums, etc. But if you go to the place where the musicians lived and recorded that music today, there's not much happening, honestly. And so that's where Merlene Castillo and the other women said, we need to build something here, which also helps resolve the contradiction that Rachel spoke so eloquently to, the problem of competing against much better financed tourist initiatives. And so my final remark will concern the economic form of this group. And perhaps this offers a segue to our next speaker, who I understand will be speaking about eco-socialism as an indigenous economic strategy. We're speaking of a cooperative, the first women's cooperative in Belize, and one of the oldest cooperatives of any kind in Belize. It's still kicking after all these years. It's important to recognize not just that it's a women's cooperative, but it's a cooperative. It's an effort, therefore, by a group of women as producers to organize themselves on a basis where they can sustain their livelihoods without taking the form of a capitalist firm. It's quite striking that they're still there and they're still trying to succeed on that basis. Unfortunately, that means that they face difficulties recruiting young, talented laborers that large, well-funded firms do not. And so we have a challenge then to reflect upon how to realize the possibility of cooperative, non-capitalist forms of economic organization at the local level. And there's a great deal that I think we can all do to contribute to that struggle. Well, that's enough for me. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks to Cynthia and Rachel for representing our team so brilliantly. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wainwright and Cynthia and Rachel. We really do appreciate your presentations. I'll now take pleasure in inviting my colleague, Vanessa, to introduce our next speaker, who will speak on the topic eco-socialism, conception of the world from the indigenous peoples. Vanessa. Vanessa, are you there? Vanessa? Okay, may I invite Renata, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Can you, I'm not too sure what's happening with Vanessa, so can you take the liberty in introducing our next speaker, if you're able to?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good evening again, everyone. So the speaker is Dr. Adriana Antonia Bermudez de Lorenzo. Dr. Bermudez is a Venezuelan professor from the Bolivian University of Venezuela, UBV. She has a Bachelor in Education. She graduated in 2003 at the University of Carabobo. She's a doctor in pedagogical sciences and a graduate of the Latin American and Caribbean Pedagogical Institute in Cuba. She's an associate professor of Bolivarian University of Venezuela, a founding professor of the UBV, academic coordinator of Venezuela Institute for Culture and Cooperation in Barbados in 2017. She's the founding director of the Confucius Institute of Venezuela. She's also the national coordinator of the training program of social management degree for local development of the UBV. She's also the coordinator of the Bolivia Mati Cathedra, UBV, and also an independent national producer, a producer and conductor of the radio program, Voices of America, during the period 2009-2014. She's also a member of the editorial board of Cilio de America, magazine of the Bolivia Mati Cathedra, 2008-2014. She's also a member of the National Commission of the Opposition Competition of the Venezuelan University. She's also the regional coordinator for the UBV project. She's also the founding member of the Francisco de Miranda Front, Havana 2003. She has also participated as a lecturer in the various national and international meetings, congresses, and also seminars in Barbados, Brazil, China, Cuba, Spain, Mexico, and Panama. She holds a passionate student about the emancipatory thinking of America, particularly the Bolivarian, Martian, and Sylvester. She's currently the academic coordinator of the Venezuelan Institute of Culture and Cooperation, Hugo Chavez Frias, attached to the Embassy of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. She's currently studying Afro-Latin American and Caribbean Studies at the Latin American Council of Social Sciences online. Amongst her most outstanding publications are a prologue of the book Municipal Desarrollo, Local and Tobacco Comitario, Municipal Action, Local Development and Community work of the outstanding Argentine Spanish writer Ezequiel Andae. She has also published some articles in the UBV Cielo de America magazine. She got the research award in the book and reading promotion, CINAL 2014, Dr. Adriano Antonia Bomedes de Lorenzo.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Thank you, Renita. Okay, well, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I would like to say that my mother tongue is Spanish, so I will do my best in English. Sorry if I make any mistake. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to the International Garifuna Conference Committee for giving me the opportunity to participate in this edition of this important event. I'd like to thank Mr. David Archie Williams and our friend and sister, Ms. Zoila Brown. Also, I would like to greet Mr. Francisco Perez Santana, head of the Venezuelan diplomatic mission here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who is accompanying me in the presentation of this topic. Eco-socialism, conception of the world from the indigenous people. I would like to say before I my PowerPoint presentation that last year I shared a topic that has to be with the importance that we have to discuss in our communities, in our institution, in our university, the importance that has to be the Afro-descendant and indigenous philosophy as a way of live, to live in our country, but also to denounce the epistemicide. In Spanish is epistemicidio. It's the way that the academic center has to cover, to do not present our experiences. So this conference is the way, and I congratulate all the organizers and the participants from different spaces and centers. And also I admire the Garifuna culture, because in Venezuela, and I talked about this last year, we have more than 32 indigenous people, indigenous groups, more than 20 indigenous languages. And also we have a very long history of struggle that our indigenous group did and have done in Venezuela since we had the period of colonization, sorry. So allow me to share the presentation that I would like to, sorry, let me close this one. Okay. Okay, would like to start with this picture. If you can see, ladies and gentlemen, it's Piedra Cueca. La Piedra Cueca is one of our natural and and material heritage that our Pemon community indigenous from Venezuela recovered since it was extracted. I don't want to say it was stolen because the government of at that time in 1998 from Venezuela, they sold this stone to the German government. So last year, it was a very nice news that we had that this group of indigenous people from Venezuela, Pemon indigenous group that we have in Venezuela, they recovered this stone. So this is the picture that I decided to present to you to start this important topic. I'd like to start this presentation with an idea of the commander Hugo Chavez, former president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and leader of the Bolivarian Revolution, who in one of his speech in the United Nations on climate change, held in Copenhagen, Denmark on December 16, 2009, he said, open quote, okay. Let's not change the climate. Let's change the system, and consequently, we will begin to save the planet. Capitalism, the destructive development model, is ending life and threatens to definitely end the human species. It was the expression that Chavez said at that moment to denounce what happened in our country, in all of our country, in our America. Let me tell you something. When I say our America, I refer to the concept from Francisco de Miranda, Simón Bolívar, and José Martí, that they say that all our country from all Americas are our America. Desde el Río Bravo, from the Brave River to the Patagonia, and all the Caribbean. That is why we listen to me to say in some of the ideas that I'm going to share with you, our America. The purpose of this paper is to unveil some of the epistemic conceptions of ecosocialism as an essential category to consider the construction of a new Venezuelan communal state, whose essential foundation come from the original culture of indigenous people. Epistemic notions about ecosocialism. Latin America and the Caribbean are among the regions affected by neoliberal policies. The history of peoples, and in particular those of Latin America and the Caribbean, is marked by constant violation of geographical spaces, cultural identities, and humanity. The looting, the cultural plundering, the historical and profound genocide suffered for centuries have marked a patriarchal and exclusionary logic of being Afro-descendant and indigenous. Therefore, it is urgent to build Black and indigenous epistemologies and cultural practices in a context where the capitalist system is overwhelming. In this regard, Michael Lowy points out that the planet suffers from a number of actions considered ecological catastrophes, such as floods, storms, environmental degradation, water poisoning, loss of biodiversity, disappearance of species through pesticides, which consequently generates forest fires and sea level rising with the melting of the Antarctic ice. This reality has its foundations in the mode of production and consumption of the modern industrial capitalist civilization. So that an essential contradiction explains. One contradiction that is the one that we are trying to build is the aspiration raised by the social and indigenous movement of our America at the Ayala and the Bolivarian social project to achieve the preservation of life on the planet and the salvation of the human species. When I say preservation of life, it has to be with the objective number 5 that we have in our plan that was made by the Bolivarian Revolution. One of the objective is to preserve our life and to save the life in our planet. This is the stage that we hope, but we are fighting against this other idea, the shortcomings that are presented in the economic, social, cultural, and environmental strategic order to specify the eco-socialist productive economic model that is ground from the formation of an eco-socialist economy. These essential contradictions are expressed in a socialist society against the barbarism. So we put in on the table, we talk about and we discuss which is the which kind of state and nation we are trying to build against the globalization, a just and alternative society against the ecological and economic distribution conflicts. We hope that we can build a socialism against the barbarism. We hope that we can believe and build the living well, good living, the buen vivir, el vivir bien, against the colonialism, capitalism, industrial colonialization. In this scenario, and without losing sight of the social, economic, cultural, and environmental threats of which the Venezuelan people have been victims in the face of the aggressions of the American empire, it is urgent to rethink the relevance of the social science in their relationship with the category of participation, popular organization, and eco-socialism from what is stated in the Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, the organic laws of people's power, and the plan of the law of homeland. Therefore, eco-socialism constitutes more than a category of analysis, but the concept of the word. In this sense, Mathieu Lecoin makes some consideration of eco-socialism and buen vivir, good living, the translation in English, which means establishing the dialogical fact between two alternatives to capitalism. The good living is still a political concept under discussion. It is in political dispute, but however, it has been conceptualized from three currents, three theories. One of them is culturalist, environmentalist, and eco-Marxist conceptions. Buen vivir is conceived as one of the theories that are thought as alternative to capitalism, putting into dialogue the nations that come from different cultures. Buen vivir, far from being an ancestral category, based on the contribution of a Quechua linguistic summa causae. It is an epistemological invention that feeds on ecological struggle and Andean way of life. We are talking about summa causal, which is a concept that comes from Ecuador indigenous group that we have in South America and also Bolivia. The way that they have to defend their rights, to have their own land, to produce their own ground provisions, to live about fish, from fish, is the way that they have and they call summa causa. So these three currents are the first one from Corriente Culturalista. The culturalist current, the good living renounces the logic of living better. It means individualistic vision. It remove the human being from society and the exploitation of the human being by the human being. Recover the primacy of life, the community vision, and renew the relationship between human beings and nature. Go from anthropocentrism to biopocentrism. Build an economic at service of community. Exercise of community participation, recognizing the own logic of organization and management of community life. Rethinks the structure of the state by recognizing the plurinational and intercultural state and recognizing cultural diversity, indigenous people are heirs and ancestral knowledge. They are legitimate bearers of the summa causae. For the ecologist current, which is the second one, good living, when vivir, constitutes a political platform through which a critique of development is made, which is why it's attributed to the notion of development, but does not question the model. It emphasizes the predatory nature of the capitalist systems, the excessive exploitation of nature, which does not imply an improvement in the living condition of the population. This current is supported by some traditions in what is called deep ecology. Its main axes pay tribute to recognition of the nature and defense of the rights of nature as a subject of rights. In other words, abandon extractivism, which involves assuming that it does not necessarily leave capitalism. This is come from a part of the next one, which is the Marxist conception. For its part, the Marxist, eco-Marxist current differs from the other two currents as it assumes the community dimension of life, the human being as a social being, the overcoming of the domination of nature by human beings. They criticize the culturalist current. They call them the Pachamónicos, since they present indigenous people on an essentialist side. This current aims at defending the rights of nature, natural resources belong to the nation, and promote regional integration. It is sustained from the anti-capitalist, of course, post-extractivism conception as a means to pass change and change the socioeconomic structure of society. Those three conceptions, currents, that we can find in this discussion about eco-socialism has their own way as they develop in South America. In South America, in most of the countries like Ecuador, Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, they have this conception that come from the first one, culturalist and ecologist current, which is summa causa. El buen vivir is the name that they have made to this conception. From this context, and understanding the need to give the debate in relation to positioning in the academic socioproductive agenda that the great homeland demands. It is proposed as an epistemic conception to think about the creation of a component. This is a discussion that we have to give in our community, to have in our community, that have to be what kind of a conception that we need. Because if we I'm trying to fight against the model that comes from the capitalism, it is complex that we can talk about the ways that we have to defend our rights as indigenous people while we are inside of the capitalist model. The proposal that the movement from Venezuela that they are doing with, giving with this eco-socialism is the way that they have, okay, I have the land, I produce the land for everybody. We produce the land for everybody, and we share our knowledge, we share our products, we share our economy because we believe in the way that we call and we say communal, the community way that we have to produce. So from this context, we are talking about to think about this component, living well, Mother Earth, that I prefer to say Pachamama. This is the way that we have a conception that we have in indigenous Latin American groups, Pachamama and eco-socialism in our community. The components are considered as sets of knowledge and practices that constitute a training axis and that can be defined in terms of thematic, nuclear, topic problems. They have their own characteristics and contribute in an interrelated way to comprehensive of the concept living well, Pachamama, and eco-socialism. So it's important, the following idea that I'm going to present to you. What do we have to be concentrated in? The understanding of territorial space from the cosmogonic identities of ancestral peoples. The understanding and defense of Pachamama, Abyayala, as a subject in the relation of man-woman, la relación hombre-mujer, Mother Earth, relationship towards the epistemological deconstruction of the dominant colonization thought. The recognition of a territorial natural heritage as a sovereign multicultural space of living well as an organization model that allows interactions and mutual economic support in the context of the People's Trade Agreement declared in the ALBA TCP, the Bolivarian Alliance for Our Peoples, which is the alliance where some of the countries that are in South America, Latin America, and the Caribbean take part. The recognition of social processes within a system of reciprocal interactions between diverse natures, which enhance the holistic consciousness of Pachamama in concrete reality. The conception of the eco-socialist culture that breaks into the hegemonic models of production and consumption and transform the logic of development. The understanding of the eco-development notion from the contribution of our American political ecology that guarantee the preservation of life on the planet and the salvation of the human species. The eco-socialism must contribute to the transformation of community spaces and allow for citizen participation in favor of sustainable development, contributing to the social productive generating an impact on the whole of society and providing economic and practical responses. It is urgent to promote a new socialist productive model which, taking into account all the geographical, economic, and humanistic potentialities, takes advantage of scientific advances to turn them into its own technology that transforms the way of life of citizens so that they can make use of their freedoms and produce what the country really requires. It is necessary to study and understand the territorial space from the cosmogonic identity of the ancestral people and the rich culture of solidarity cooperation, not force, in the construction of the system of distinctive relationships that characterize the new state that is the communal state. The communal state that Venezuela is trying to get. Promote the analysis, interpretation, and strengthening of community organization. We have some ways from our indigenous and popular, our people, the way that we have to organize communal council, community corridors, and its transcendent protagonist participation in the configuration of a model of production and social distribution of goods for the good life of living well from the perspective of the original worldview. Of course, taking into account the current social and political context. Incorporation of the eco-development category from the contribution of our American political ecology that contributes to the preservation of life on the planet and the salvation of the human species. Discussion and problematization of the immediate community reality, making use of philosophical, but more than philosophical, practical ways that we have to get our rights, and also the way that our people in our country have to defend, and also to understand the identity that our indigenous people have. We have in Venezuela el Ministerio del Poder Popular para el ecosocialismo, the Ministry of Ecosocialism, that has a very huge project that has to be with the preservation, how to take care of our land, of our air, but also more than this one that have to be with the good living, el buen vivir, en suma causai, in our Abyayala, have to be with the way that we think about our indigenous group. As my final idea has to be with the concept of Pachamama. Pacha is the universality, the universe, and mama, the initial word of all our childhood, is the mother. The Pachamama is the earth that allows itself to be fertilized, endures, produces life, and our life. So we have to think about this area that we are thinking in, and we are working in Venezuela, that have to be with the ecological, social, and democratic area. So we have to reorganize the production of the protection of nature, respecting their life cycles, head towards the reorientation of the economy, cultural change of consciousness, which generates a decrease in the consumption of energy. This is very important, objects and material. Think about new collective emancipation linked to the protection of nature, reappropriation of the means of production, transformation of social relations, considering various forms of properties, public collective compatible with the objective of eco-socialism, democratic ethics, which is the responsibility of social movement and people. It's implied a decrease in consumption, because when we talk about also capitalism, we have to give the discussion about what do we consume. And finally, I would like to thank you with this image, which is Abya, Nuestra América, Somos Acá. And if you see, you can see the map in the other way around, that our indigenous people in South America, in Venezuela, defend this concept, because it's the term that has been used by our indigenous movement in the Americas to refer to the American continent from the native people stance. Abya is an ethical attitude acknowledging the various original people's right to live, to exist, and keep the history. We have a challenge, many challenges, and we have to defend our identity. And we in Venezuela are working to preserve our indigenous group, but also to preserve our natural resources that, you know, most of you know, that the imperialist forces want to stall, to continue the colonialization in our country. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Bermudez, for that very comprehensive presentation. I would perhaps use my moderator privilege and perhaps take two questions, one for the first group of speakers and then one for Dr. Bermudez. And then we shall proceed to the panel discussion. Then we'll take some more questions. So are there any questions? We will take two, one for the Dr. Joel and Cynthia and Rachel, and then we'll take one for Dr. Bermudez. Any burning questions? Can you use the icons and raise your hand so that my colleagues could unmute you? And we ask you to keep the questions very precise. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. Any questions in the chat? Okay, there appears to be no questions at this time. So may I invite Sister Renetta again to, well, first of all, let me thank Dr. Bermudez for your presentation and for sharing your experience and these concepts, and prior Dr. Joel Wainwright, Cynthia Ellis, and Rachel Brunot. Renetta, may I invite you now to introduce the leader of the next group of speakers, and then we'll proceed to the presentation.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. I will begin with organizer Egbert Higinio. Okay, so Egbert Shaka Higinio is a Garifuna born in Dangriga, Belize. He taught at the high schools of Belize, Oakland, Tracy, and San Jose cities. Presently, he teaches and lectures adults on English composition, comparative literature, logic, critical thinking, and philosophy at San Jose Evergreen Valley College in Los Angeles City College and San Jose State University. He appreciates critical race theory of literature readings and engages in public discussions on racism, justice, immigration, poverty, and liberation theology. He has attended philosophical international conferences where he has published pieces on, for example, the Caribbean, mimicry, imitation, or mimesis through the poetry of Derek Walcott, ecotourism gone awry in Belize. The phenomena of an Anglo-Guatemalan Belize territorial claim and a concept paper for Harvard University Africana Studies of the Afro-Belizeans of Los Angeles. Presently, he's collaborating on documentaries on topics that utilizes the literary tools of deconstruction and hermeneutics. He's passionate about students learning the fundamentals of academic research so that they recognize themselves in the importance of the intellectual productivity and understanding and their condition to the academic community. He's a cultural activist who enjoys reading, soccer, traveling, gardening, and bookkeeping. Sorry, beekeeping, I think that is. Egbert earned his BA in English literature from the University of Belize and continued studies in comparative literature at San Jose State University, from which he obtained his MA degree in philosophy. He's presently president of the Garifuna Nation, a position he has enjoyed since August 2020. He's unapologetic and about advocacy group that promotes the indigenous rights of its peoples who presently live along the coastlines of Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, and St. Vincent. In his opinion, the Garifuna people are victims of European colonialism, deteriorization, and genocide in particular. There are approximately 800,000 Garifuna people, inhabitants of the Caribbean and the Americas, including the USA. Mr. Higigenio presently lectures into philosophy and critical thinking at Merritt College, Oakland, California.
Thank you very much, Renita Peters.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Before I begin, I want to bring in my sister, PJ Serrano, who will do a libation before I proceed with my presentation. PJ? Is Ms. Serrano there? You have to unmute, PJ.
Just done.
Good. Go ahead. We can't hear you. You may have to take off the mic and go directly into the computer. We don't hear you. PJ, just unmute. Kindly unmute. Go ahead. Oh, we hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. A libation recognizes the presence of our supreme God and our living God. Rabawele aniha libation le leserua hon lusung tigaba fulumala spirit le kememua, like the ground. Iniha libation le serua leader read. Usually that is poured out on the ground as a sign of reverence for family, for friends, certainly for God, as I mentioned, and for our ancestors. Because we beg and invite our ancestors to this present moment and to this event. So I am going to take us through just a very short prayer or spiritual encroaching before I hand it back to Egbert. Okay. Sung tigabafo ay hadiha wa mutibo lo yaba dibula wo maraba wayule leda adunra gunile. Ayaha hayunda yamba ya wabaso untigabafo, rutu wa sereme, luagu ha boserunia, luha dunderu nu, luha dora guwau lida hahu dragu bubar. Fregi tu wa luagu uwarguni. Rutu wa sereme, luagu ladin Garifuna duo wabar wogwon, lu iter meme baduala lida aba. Noke kala wageira Garifuna wagia lida aba. I am giving praise and thanks, thanking for togetherness as a Garifuna people, for spiritual guidance from our ancestors in a thankful spirit, and for moving Garifuna Duo forward as one nation, the Garifuna nation. Sereme.
Thank you. Beti Guyon. Ositnahun Guerrero. I bring you greetings from the sacred space of Merritt College, Oakland, California, on behalf of my ancestors, specifically from my maternal line, the Velasquez, the Centino, the Thomases, from the paternal, the Martinez, the Hinios, to my elders, Joseph Palacio, Roy Cayetano, Godsman Ellis, Simeon Thompson, my teacher in the room, Miss Lydia Flores. I seek your guidance as I present to you the objectives of the Garifuna Nation in short. But before I proceed, I want to thank you, Ronnie Daniels, Brother David Williams, Mrs. Deborah Darabul, Head of State of UWI Open Campus, to Mrs. Janelle Henry, Rose, Secretary General of UNESCO, St. Vincent. A hearty greeting from the Garifuna Nation and its executive officers. And to my young sister, Colonel Zoila Ellis, who when we were younger, used to do our groundings on many projects in Belize. Sister Zoila Ellis, thanks for making this conference, the 8th, a reality. Now, I think many people would be asking, so what is the Garifuna Nation? I would start by saying it's non-sectarian, non-partisan. There are many in the Garifuna Nation, as I saw, I'm seeing for the past 2 years. We are not monolithic. We are very diverse. We might be constrained by distance, but not by languages. Some speak Spanish, some speak English, some Garifuna. So it is my duty on this small Starliner boat to challenge myself and maintain the line of the order of presentations today. We will start with James, and then we'll move on to Cynthia, and I think the others, I'll come towards the end. So over to you, James.
So thank you very much, Egbert. And I would like to say, first of all, that I certainly give thanks for the support, that has been extended, especially since, I got involved with the Garifuna Nation. And I would also like to call to mind my parents, who actually trained me in such a manner that the Garifuna movement towards the continuing building of the Garifuna nation is of very high priority. Beloved friends and family members, before I get into the substance of my presentation, I would like to express gratitude to the Secretariat and organizers of this conference, the 8th International Garifuna Conference, for accepting the abstract I presented for this conference connected to the theme I am now presenting on current relevance of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership. It goes without saying that this effort, the celebration of UNESCO's Declaration of Garifuna Language, Music, and Dance as a masterpiece of the intangible heritage of mankind, armed with the aim of continuously building on the same, certainly represents a significant turning point in the efforts of Garinagu to effectively address issues affecting them as they at the same time contribute to the betterment of society on a whole. The information I will be sharing reflects current research I am undertaking as part of a course I will conduct at the Garifuna University Without Walls. A major goal of the course is the raising of a cadre of leaders, including junior youth, 11 to 15 years old, and youth, 16 to 20 years old, who are able to apply Garifuna leadership to facilitate development at the individual, institutional, and community level. As we have mentioned, the title of the presentation is Current Relevance of the Ancestral Garifuna Mental Model and Leadership. The mental model or mindset of a people greatly determines their identity, level of their social and spiritual bonding, their readiness to collaborate, their accomplishments, leadership practices, and the effectiveness of institutions and communities they build. The mental model developed and exercised by Garifuna ancestors, particularly by Garifuna ancestral leaders, facilitated their effectively countering genocide, slavery, mass piracy, and colonization in the New World on their motherland, and facilitated the Garifuna language, music, and dance being proclaimed as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity by UNESCO in 2001. Issues that Garifuna ancestors face are yet extant. Terrorism, prejudice, including racial and religious prejudice, and the spread of materialism are evident in various parts of the world today. Through recognizing and applying the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style, present-day Garinagu, children, youth, and adults will be able to develop greater confidence to progress as a people and to effectively take their position and make significant contributions towards progress of the community of nations. Elements of the deeply spiritual and virtue-based ancestral Garifuna mental model will be explored, its progressive nature and current relevance demonstrated, and its intimate relationship with ancestral Garifuna leadership highlighted. What is a mental model? The mental model or mindset of an individual is composed of the thoughts and experiences which determine the way the individual sees the world and how he or she interprets experiences and make decisions. The mental model of a people or culture are those shared thoughts and experiences which determine the way the people typically see the world and collectively interpret experiences and make decisions. In addition to their thoughts and experiences, the mental model of individuals and cultures is impacted by their genetics. the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style. As we will see, the ancestral Garifuna mental model is deeply spiritual, virtue-based, progressive, and balanced in nature, characteristics which make it currently relevant. The ancestral Garifuna mental model is the essence of the ancestral Garifuna leadership style, a leadership style much characterized by deep care for the well-being, peace, and security of others, and the fostering of conditions, of inclusivity, unity, and justice. It is the effectiveness of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style that facilitated our ancestors effectively countering genocide, slavery, mass piracy, and colonization in the New World and on their motherland. It is that same mental model and leadership style that has ensured our existence today, and the same which facilitated the Garifuna language, music, and dance being proclaimed as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity by UNESCO in 2001. Given the proven power and effectiveness of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style to counter genocide and all the evils associated therewith, evils which are yet evident in various parts of the world, clearly indicate the need for us to revive, further develop, consolidate, and defend such a mental model and leadership style, so that as we, as a people, children, youth, and adults, harness the material and spiritual benefits thereof, and as a result, develop greater confidence to manage our own affairs and progress, and effectively take our position within the community of nations, we may also make significant contributions towards the progress of the rising new world order, an order bound to be reflective of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style. What is the essence of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style? The essence of the deeply spiritual and virtue-based ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style is a beginning to end perspective, a perspective which conveys that according to the grand divine design, we begin our life here on earth and we continue on to Seri. This is the Garifuna word for heaven. And in other words, life is a journey from God unto God. This beginning to end aspect of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style gives rise to a balanced and wholesome attitude towards life. It gives rise to a lifestyle which aims to address the needs of both body and the human soul. It is generally clear to Garinago that if only one part of their reality is attended, or one part attended more than the other, imbalance certainly results. Hence, according to the mental model and leadership style, keen attention is to be given to ensure the existence of conditions which facilitate health and well-being of both the human soul and body. According to that mental model and leadership style, such can only be achieved by generating, implementing, consolidating, and defending a virtue-based vision which benefits and engages every member of society, children, youth, and adults. This universal and eternal beginning to end perspective of the ancestral Garifuna model and leadership style is indicated by Christ saying, from spirit to spirit. Prophet Muhammad saying, from God do we come and unto him do we return. And Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, testifying that there is no other way for humanity except the straight path, the path to a materially and spiritually wholesome and prosperous civilization. Aside from personages who have been widely recognized as super effective civilization builders and manifestations of God, demonstrating support and agreement for the essence of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style, elements of that mental model and leadership style are also proclaimed, practiced, and defended by foremost thinkers and progressive nations. This being the case clearly indicates that the world will not only benefit from efforts to preserve Garifuna language, music, and dance, but more so to adapt the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style, for it communicates the ultimate direction and destiny of humanity and sheds great light on humanity's shared ideal world. The construction of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and the rising of Garifuna leadership. The ancestral Garifuna mental model leads to an understanding that as beings essentially spiritual in nature, human beings necessarily seek well-being, peace, security, happiness, freedom, and justice, and all virtues related to the human soul. The circumstances created by the European colonists, circumstances into which the Garifuna culture was born and tested, sought to deprive other peoples, particularly the peoples of the so-called New World and the Africans, of these naturally sought virtues, and began a dehumanizing, marginalizing, and materialistic trend which progressive minds today readily recognize as a major crime against humanity, and a situation whose legacy humanity is yet to stem for the sake of the good of the world and the happiness of the nations. The passionate desire to enjoy these virtues gave rise to ancestral Garifuna leadership, essentially the lifestyle born of the ancestral Garifuna mental model, a lifestyle intimately tied to navigating highly challenging circumstances with much tact and wisdom. It is worthy to note in this connection that ancestral Garifuna leadership extends from home, from parents, onto elders within the community, and engaged every member of society, including children. The period of the development of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style spans the period in St. Vincent, widely regarded post 1635 to the 1970s, when many Garinago migrated to the United States, and for the most part leaving grandparents, particularly grandmothers, to raise children, a situation which apparently weakened the strength of the family and disrupted home-based leadership, including the transmission of culture to the young. The following are 9, it's going to be 10 of the 19 elements of the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style. The primacy of God, deep respect for the spirit of our ancestors, the oneness of earth and heaven, the necessity of strategic thinking, fearlessness, the far-reaching significance of the family, self-sufficiency, consensus, deep respect for elders, and a high value for education. In summary, it is evident that the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style has not yet been adequately appreciated, but there are, and I should say thank God, eloquent and highly encouraging indications that its influence is bound to further rise with time. Anyone who keenly studies this mental model and its attendant leadership style and its beginning to end perspective will realize that it embraces and provides for drawing the best from all of humanity's history, science, art, and technology, and all religious thought. We, the descendants of those stalwarts of true and wholesome community building, have the responsibility to recognize this greatest of gifts that our exemplary and far-sighted ancestors have left for us and the world as a legacy. As the world struggles under the weight of such issues as materialism, disunity, inequality, injustice, terrorism, climate change, religious and racial prejudice, Garifuna individuals, children, youth, and adults, Garifuna institutions, and Garifuna communities, and those who learn, adapt, practice, and defend the ancestral Garifuna mental model and leadership style are bound to discover and benefit from the huge and far-reaching capacities stored in humanity's divine nature for true and lasting and all-inclusive family, community, nation, and civilization building. In truth, the mental model and leadership style of our ancestors is worthy of recognition, of celebration, propagation, and defense. Let us, their descendants, take the lead in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much. Next, I think we'll have questions for you later on, but next is, I think, Cynthia.
Yes. Thank you, Egbert. Thank you, James. I just want to complement the perspective that James was given. And as you were speaking, James, I was thinking that we are part of a mosaic and a tapestry. My focus will be on Garifuna Duo, just a few reflections as I have been learning and being downloaded along what you're talking about by actually taking pilgrimage into different Garifuna communities and spending time with our people in the Daboyeba, where everything that we need to sustain ourselves is present. The Daboyeba is our sacred space. Our ancestors had no passports, boundaries, degrees, or anything like that. Our ancestors in their brilliance still speak to us all around every day. I am present in Barranco at the Daboyeba there. And as I am traversing between Barranco, Punta Gorda, Paine, St. Bite, Hopkins, Georgetown, Dangriga, there's one thread that comes through in our healing process. Within the Daboyeba, we present the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it is a form of release, transformation, and healing that has no lectures, no words, no papers. That is not a critique of what is happening right now. I think it is very awesome that we are having these presentations. But as I recall, when President Mandela was released during the time of apartheid, after 26 years of deep listening in incarceration, he was able on return into the wider society to have guidance as to how to bring together people from all walks of life. So as we humbly submit the distinctiveness of Garifuna people, we are also humbly submitting that we need to cross many rivers and build many bridges and make many connections, and to listen very deeply as we sit at the feet of our elders. So one of the things that is very awesome in Garifuna Dual is the respect for our elders and those who came before us, and this movement and this nation that was long before we were born, and the divine eminence that exists in our rituals, in our language, in our food, in our way of being, in the drums that are housed in the Daboyeba, the three massive, awesome drums that speak, as Roy Caetano said, the drums of our fathers. the cleansing, the healing, and the detox that we can experience right now, which has no words, no language that can be translated into any language, as we bathe in the sea and our healing and our sacred circle manifests itself. The healing that comes through the rites of passage from the womb to the tomb. The healing that takes place in the perfection of the Daboyaba, where everything that we need is present. Sustainability, the production of the cassava, which is the essence of our being. The making of the cassava bread, the distribution of the cassava bread. It is a dynamic and interactive experience that is available to all of us right now. All of us in every single space in this sacred circle. It is available in Central America, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, South America, Africa, Europe, the Americas, the Caribbean islands. It's available for us right now. So the presence of Garifuna Dua, which I call all of us into, as through the Garifuna Nation, we've been having these conversations in obedience to the call of our ancestors, to the dreams that they dreamt, with far less resources that we have, than we had, that we experience a relationship with land, which is not about fighting for territory or claiming property, but claiming, as you rightfully share, James, that essence and understanding and being of who we are, stepping into the power of who we are, anywhere we are in the world. This is what Garifuna Duo is about. So at this time, I just want to close with this experience of inviting this connectivity in the sacred circle to make the intangible tangible wherever we are, and particularly the people of the diaspora in the United States, in Canada. That Urume is not just a physical place of being. Urume is a state of being and connectivity and awareness, a consciousness that even like the Irish or those who never go to Ireland, we are already in Urume. We are already standing on the shoulders of our ancestors who came long before us. And whatever happens in Urume happens to us. Whatever happens in Belize or Honduras, where our brothers and sisters are being murdered, is also happening to us. And therefore, that is what Garifuna Duo is about. And I want to release at this time in thanking you for your presence, and our ancestors' presence. Sereme.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. The next person who's supposed to talk on the panel is Dr. Anita Barrett. Are you there? And then I'll wrap it up.
May I invite Renita just to briefly introduce Dr. Barrett?
Sure.
And yes. Renata?
Sure, Ronnie. Okay, Dr. Anita Barrett is a lecturer and special needs lead at the Qatar University Foundation Program, Department of English. She's a native speaker of Garifuna language and has been involved in preservation and revitalization efforts. Specifically, she's an ardent advocate for Indigenous language inclusion in national education systems. Her current research interests include special education in tertiary institutions and teaching of Indigenous languages. Dr. Anita Barrett.
Good night. Thank you to the committee for inviting me and the Garifuna Nation to be a part of this illustrious event. We appreciate it. Good night, sir. That's saying good night to everybody in the Garifuna language. I would like to share a little bit about our interest in getting the teaching of Garifuna language in schools. It is an ongoing struggle for a number of reasons. Primarily, however, the reason that there is such a pushback, so to speak, on the effort is because of the mentality of our communities, our governments, and our leaderships. In Belize, we have our pride and joy, the Gulisi Primary School, which is a success story, and it wasn't an easy feat. And Phyllis and Roy Caetano can speak to that, along with Marsha and many other really loyal Garinagu activists who do not stop. It's an ongoing effort. Now, with activism, the success of activism is consistency. And in our lifetime, as is the struggle of the Garifuna people, it's ongoing, and it is juxtaposed with the whole idea of living and existing and surviving. So oftentimes, activists don't really last very long. They ebb and flow, they come with the tide, they disappear for a while, and it gets frustrating. So I want to first start off by thanking the people who are steadfast in the interest of Garifuna activism, and who are they set the ground for us, and as we build on what they have put in place for us. So I decided while listening to the presenters to change the focus of my presentation a little bit, to move it a little bit more away from the talk, and to present a little bit of actual like something that I would want to leave with you in terms of education. One of the main reasons given to me why we couldn't get the language in our schools is because we do not have material, and we do not have written text, we do not have books, and we do not have materials to use for our students. And this, while it is a fact, it's also an excuse. And when we think about I'm going to refer to the mental model that the Garifuna University Without Walls is proposing, and we are actually trying to show that this is one of the ways that we could get back our Garifuna dwell, the way of the Garifuna people, the lifestyle of the Garifuna people, the mentality of our ancestors that has enabled us to survive up to now, is based on the whole mental model principle, where we start with the spirituality and then we come to now. So when it comes to preserving our language, one of the elements of the mental model is being self-sufficient, like we have to do it for ourselves. So for example, Roy Caetano didn't wait for somebody to come and propose to UNESCO to honor us. We did it for ourselves via Roy and the people who worked with him at that time. So in terms of getting our language into the schools, then we have to be the ones to get on the ground to do it ourselves. Now, Pennycook wrote that language doesn't really change. I mean, there's a popular belief that language does change and it's arbitrary. In one sense, it does. But there's the other side that says it doesn't really change, but what does change are the people who use the language. We decide what we need and how the language can serve us, and then we decide how we use the language. So many of our Garinagu who walk away from the Garifuna language, when they do decide to come back to it, you will find that the language is still there. It doesn't really change. So with that, then, if we should get the language into the schools, and if we should start creating our own material, I think this is one way that we could get the system to see that we are serious about preserving our own language. And we're in a much better place than we were a few years ago in terms of this. But I think we still have to be, apart from just talking around and about it, we have to show that we are creating our own material. So I want to share with you, if the host would allow me to share my screen. I want to share with you a few songs that I created. Well, one that I created, one that I adopted, and another one, I'm not sure if I created it or if I heard it somewhere, but the point is, if we want to promote language in education, and if we want to create systems in place where we're using our own language in terms of passing it on to the generations that are coming up, we have to produce. So I decided that I'm gonna use my 2 minutes or so that's left to share a few productions. So first I want to share the Garifuna alphabet. We created our own alphabet. And so I created a song that we use at our Gulusi at Gulisi. And I'm hoping that by using this forum to share it, that it would catch on and you would help us to share it, because we have to share our own material. So this is the Garifuna alphabet, which is just if you look at it carefully, A, E, I, O, U are described. The name of the letter is a description of its physical appearance. So for example, A, when you write the small letter A, it has a little arm, so we call it Garunat. Then E, the small letter E has a little opening which looks like a mouth, so we call it Gayumat. Then the I, because it has the little tip or the point, we call it Gagirit. And the O, it goes round and round, we call it Gararat. Then in Garifuna, we have the U and the the U and then one with the two I's. So one is Maguti and the other one is Gagut. All the consonants then are just like Ba, Da, Fa, Ga, Ha, and so on. So I kind of compose a little tune to go with it to kind of help us, you know, pass it on, so to speak. So I want to share that with you. So the tune goes like this. Garu natiba chada gayu matifa gaha gagiriti kala mananya gararati parasata gaguti maguti waya. Or the other way around. I'm gonna go again. If you can join in, please do. Okay. Or you could join in with the consonants. Egbert, let me hear you say the ba when it comes on the da
Ba.
and the fa. Okay, so I go with the vowels. Garu nati ba cha da gayu mati fa ga ha ga giriti kala mananya gararati parasata maguti gaguti waya. So now it sounds simplistic at best, but if we share it, this is a start. This is how we create our own material. Our language is as alive as we make it. Like I said, it doesn't really change. We have to be the ones to make it relevant to us. The education system doesn't cater to this. But if we could make it into a song and we could invite them to participate and we could get them interested and get our children interested, if we could teach this to our children, I teach this to my grandchildren and then they run with it. It is a start. Another little one is the counting song. Abba, Biam, Uru, Gader, Sing, Sees, Said, With, Nef, 1 to 10. Abba, Biam, Uru, Garinagu, Gader, Sing, Sees, Garinagu, Said, With, Nef, Garinagu, This, Garinagu, Irahim. All right. You like that, huh, Renita? I see you going at it. You want to try it again? Abba, Biama. Gadere sengu, sisi gari nagu, sedu widu, nef gari nagu, sisi gari nagu. Yay! Good job. Okay, this is one that I kind of adopt this one. It's Ebuga. Ebuga in Garifuna means to walk. So I say, Beibuga, you walk. This is a children's song, and you can do it with your children. You can do it with your friends and so on. And teaching the language. And you can change it up. It's Ebuga, but you can sing it as Beibuga, meaning you walk. Or you can sing it as Neibuga, meaning I walk. Or you can sing it as Teibuga, she walks, whichever way. So this is also a way that you can use, you could teach the language structures, yes. So this one goes, and you might be familiar with this tune. It says, a booga, and then I usually do the action. A booga, a booga, a booga, a booga, chubaba, chubaba, a bagwa, a bagwa, a bagwa ba, a bagwa, a bagwa, a bagwa ba, re ba. Redeba. It's like walking, 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 jump, 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 running, running, running. Then you see the children running everywhere, running, running, running. Now you stop. Now you stop. So we tell our kids in Garifuna, bay booga, bay booga, bay booga, bay booga, chubaba, chubaba, a bagwa, a bagwa, a bagwa ba, a bagwa, a bagwa, a bagwa ba, ready ba, ready ba. Means that you stop.
Yeah, I got it.
So the point is, if we create and make it relevant, that is how our language catches up to what we're doing, because our language isn't going anywhere. It's gonna be there for those who want to use it, those who want to incorporate it. Now we have to consciously be finding ways to make it relevant to our own surroundings while we continue to live our lives and do what we think we need to be doing to survive out here. And I had one more, but I think my time is up. This one is a solidarity song that was composed by my grandmother. So I'm gonna leave with this. And on the right hand side, it has been translated into English by my brother, Marion Earl Lambe, who lives in Mango Creek in Independence Village in Belize. And if you look at the language, if you look at the lyrics of the song, it's really a solidarity, a call for solidarity. And when I think about what the previous presenter was presenting about Pachamama, and when I think about what Cynthia was talking about, our spiritual, how we're grounded in the earth, and when I think about the mental model by James Eligio, all of this, all of these things are related to what we have inherited from those who came before us, and it's a legacy that they gave us. It is our responsibility, therefore, to hold on to it and to kind of push forward. And I want to say thank you to the presenters, to the organizers of this event, and for including us. And it is only by our unity and collaboration will we stand a chance to leave something definitive for the generations of Garinagu people that are coming behind us. So thank you very much. That's it from me.
Thank you, Dr. Anita. I think the next person who's here is our Minister of Lands, the Garifuna Nation. We have assigned him to be Minister of Lands, Mr. Joe Guerrero. Are you here?
Hi, yes, Egbert, I'm here. Hi, good evening.
So you got 5 minutes, then I'll wrap up.
Very good. Good evening to one and all. and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. And I have found it so far. I've been finding it to be very fruitful, and I really enjoy hearing the different perspectives coming all within the context of the Garifuna. As the Garifuna Nation Lands Minister, we strive to secure our traditional lands, which as recently, which recently Judge Conte, Abdullah Conte, Supreme Court Justice of Belize, had ruled in favor of the principle that collective land ownership is within the laws of Belize, which was extraordinary for us, because prior to that, the government had denied collective people their titles to their lands, to lands that they own collectively. And usually the indigenous people would be Garinago and whatever other native peoples exist in Central America. It has been established that Garinago are indigenous / tribal people who have special rights because they are distinct from the colonial powers that engulfed the territories in which they live. And they then became a part of one nation or the other, mostly due to colonialism. This is the reality today for us, from Urume to Central America. In Central America, we arrived after exile, where we lived a distinct life from the population that was there, which was a mixture of the European and the native people, as well as native people. We survived. We lived by the shores because many of us survived with through fishing and other sustainable activities such as farming. And also our culture, our language, we brought with us, which originated in Urume. Now, Cynthia spoke earlier about Garifuna Duo, which includes, as the UNESCO proclamation says, the language, the music, and the dance. We cannot have these things if we do not have our own land, our autonomy. Because whenever we live among other people, we are forced through laws, through all kinds of forces coming at us, social, economic forces coming at us, we're forced to assimilate. And this this assimilation, I believe, is what's causing the rapid decline of Garifuna Duo worldwide. If Garifuna Duo is lost, it would be a loss to all humankind, as reflected by UNESCO's proclamation that we're a gift, really, to mankind. So Garifuna, wherever they are, even in Urume, where most of the culture and the language have been lost, they do have special rights under the ILO 169 to retrieve the culture, the language, the music, and the dance, and then begin to thrive once more. How unfortunate it is that Central America benefits greatly from a culture created in Urume. I find that unfair to our place of origin. Land will be and is the primary source for the perpetuation of this beautiful culture. Excuse me. This beautiful culture that was started in Urume. We, by our exile, by that exile, we made sure that Garifuna will live. Now, it's a shame that we are in exile and we will let it die. But we need our land in order for us to live. Everyone needs land to live. So one thing we Garinago have in common is that we must fight. We must fight for our land together. It's something we must accomplish together. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe, for that short and very pointed summon or order that we have to fight for our land. We clearly I've been listening to most of the presentations, and it's clear to me that what we inherited from the European model is of little used to our permanent, survival. So hence, we have to come up with it ourselves. And so when the previous president of this Garifuna nation, Ruben Reyes, decided to proclaim that there will be a Garifuna nation, I was a little bit, disconcerted, but I think it was in order. So for the 6 months that I've been trying to move, if I could share this, my screen, to activism via the use of cyberspace. Can you see my screen? Yes? Anybody? Do you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Good. So, so I've been busy since August 2020. This is, I don't have the technical expertise here. Busy teaching, busy with activism. In November 2021, we had our first virtual conference where we explored the idea of the Garifuna Nation. And through deep thinking and discussion, we decided that the foundation of Garifuna Dao is on the backbone of our women. The women are the backbone of Garifuna Dao through the practices of the music, the dance, the teaching of the language, storytelling in the marketplace. In terms of health and wellness, we found that women are the backbone of Garifuna Dao. And so therefore, we engage with this discussion further by visiting what we traditionally refer to as Uganda. Not Hopkins, Uganda. But the colonial masters in Belize have us use the word Hopkins. And so, that dominant force has us referring to our traditional village as Hopkins, but we would want to have Uganda. The Garifuna Nation has embarked on a radio show in which we discuss issues affecting our communities. This is our voice, and this is our way of educating our people. So I'm challenged, yes, by being this at a distance. We are far away from home, but we have people on the ground who are doing some of this work. January 15th, we went virtually to See and Bite to deep listen. I refer to it as deep listening in See and Bite, along with our brothers from Jamaica, Canada, who are using some of our ideas to develop their Afrocentric Institute. But our finding in See and Bite was a little disturbing in that we found that See and Bite name as a village is not on the tourism maps of Belize, and in some instances we are told that See and Bite apparently the name is off the map. So this is something we want to explore to transform our power from genocide to economic, psychological, and social power. These are some of the topics we explored. We invited our expertise, our own Garifuna experts, to share with us their tools in making specific economic assessments of our communities. And just recently, under the theme Tuluha Wadani, our time has come from intangible to tangible. We celebrated Women's Week in Barranco, doing again some deep listening. As we presented ourselves, we are told that there are some issues with, other indigenous groups in Barranco, and I pray that the colonial system is not setting us up against other indigenous groups. We continue to maintain contact with our brothers and sisters, Felicia, Andrews from St. Vincent, to make the point that we can promote activism, not solely physically, but we could do it virtually as we are doing here. The Garifuna Nation is present. These are some pictures, tell a million stories in Barranco with our Colonel Cynthia Ellis, participating with the women in Barranco in a demonstration of baking cassava. We are presencing ourselves in St. Bite, exploring a gardening project. We are in St. Bite, Barranco, concerned about the conditions of the library, the health, the employment, and hopefully we'll be in Honduras very soon to have a discussion with our brothers and sisters as what is the issue in terms of the atrocities, the murdering of our women in Honduras, the economic dispossession. As far as I'm concerned, the genocide is in full swing. And our brother, Wellington Ramos, who is collaborating with UWI on a historical rendition. So I mention these things because, I'm more concerned about the activism part. I don't have a paper, but I do appreciate this conference in all its seriousness, in all its serious renditions as we move forward to re-establish, to reinforce the Garifuna Nation, whose life was disrupted by the greed, the capitalist enterprise of the colonial masters. I turn it over to you, and thanks for this permission to present.
Thank you very much, Egbert and team. Cynthia, Dr. Barrett, Mr. Guerrero, and Eligio. Thank you very much for sharing this segment. I think this brings us to the end of the presentations for this third evening of this conference. I want now to engage in a few questions to the panelists, our presenters, and so I will invite persons to use the icon, the raise hand icon, if you have any questions for any of the presenters. We could do that for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will invite Brother Adrian just to share a short piece, and then I'll turn you over to the main organizers of this conference. I just want to say it has been a very engaging, productive 3 nights, and I know there are lots of questions, and I know we wouldn't be able to answer all of them here this evening, but I was just wondering whether or not there is a one-stop space in which we could continue this dialogue, this conversation, this meeting of minds, thoughts, and reflections, hopefully geared towards action across borders. I think this is something we need to pay attention to urgently. And somebody in the chat asked about whether or not they would have the pleasure of having the transcript from the conference. And I'll leave that to Sister Zola when she comes to give a closing remarks. But are there any questions? Vanessa, any questions from any of the? I don't see any hands raised.
Yes, there were some questions raised in the chat earlier on. There are two questions to James Eligio regarding the Baha'i faith. A question on how does the Baha'i faith embraces the Garifuna spirituality, and does Baha'i negate spirit possession? So those are two questions that were raised to James.
All right. Maybe just to, maybe further comment, I would just like to say that it's important for us to, keep in mind, as the president has indicated that, well, in regards to, Garifuna Nation as a movement or as an institution, it's apolitical, non-sectarian. But in light of general knowledge, we know that it's, the only way we can really get to appreciate ourselves is to really do deep reflection on where are we coming from, what was the this mental model that our ancestors actually developed on St. Vincent, because we know that the context of St. Vincent is a context that I believe very much provides us with a mental framework that we need even today, because, as the presentation, as I make clear in my presentation, many of the things that we are yet facing today, the prejudice, the materialism, these things are yet with us. And when we look at the way, the thoughts that our ancestors had to really come up with, what were those thoughts that assisted them to be able to be firmly acting against those forces, it is then that we realize that, yes, there is much that we need to take, from that experience. There is much that we need to utilize as a standard, for us to be able to go forward. And so how does that relate to even other faiths? Actually, I believe that when we look at other faiths, which helps us to feel comfortable, with our spirituality, to our mental model, we get to realize that, our people, the Garinagu people, very much reflects the essence of every world religion, every one of them, which is that God, we believe that we're created by God, and that, within us are these virtues. And once, and when we speak about virtues, we're talking about the goodness, the possibility for us to exercise justice, equality, patience, forgiveness. And really, without these things, we cannot really live. And so every religion, has these, promotes these virtues. And so it's very important that we see that. But I have to say, really, from, because I'm a researcher, I've been researching, our people, especially within the past year. I have immersed myself in striving to understand our, Garifuna mental model. And what I find really is that, looking at the Baha'i teachings, because it's actually addressing this idea of all of humanity operating as a unit. The aim is to bring about world unity. And when we look into the Garifuna mindset is very much that we are all the children of God, and that we need to work together. We need to work together, for the benefit of the progress of humanity on a whole. And so we do not. So once we appreciate wholesomeness, once we appreciate wholesomeness, we will even better appreciate our own culture, and we will be more confident that we as a people can contribute, to the progress of humanity on a whole. And so, yes, there is direct connection between, Garifuna mental model, and the Baha'i faith and other faiths of the world.
Okay, thank you, Brother Leo. Are there any other questions?
Ronia, I believe that Egbert wants to add something.
Okay, sure. Egbert, go right ahead.
Sure. So we, the Garifuna Nation, from the Garifuna Nation's viewpoint, we are the nation since we left St. Vincent, since we were genocided. I want to put that in the transitive verb, right? Genocided by the British, has evolved. And so we have Baha'i Garifuna, we have Catholic Garifuna, we have Anglican Garifuna. We have, in Belize, we have Garifunas who are hardcore PUP or hardcore UDP, but there is a Garifuna-ness, Garifuna duo that seemingly supersedes. So we will revisit, yes, we will revisit the mental model as a way to perhaps explore our experience. I was listening to one of the presenters earlier, I don't know if it was Dr. Humes, or somebody suggesting that that's an area we need to explore. When 2,500 people were left on Balisao, and the other, to my imagination, looked at the 2,500 they saw as the attorney and accountant perhaps were writing their numbers, right? And what was that experience like? We don't know. I've never been in a war. I've never experienced, physically. So the mental model, we would like to, explore that some more from maybe other modalities, right, that exist out there. So yes, we appreciate. However, I do like that virtue model, the model on virtues, because my ancestors were never pirates. So therefore, it's only Hollywood that glorifies piracy. But my ancestors were never pirates. We were hardworking, people who lost territory, right? And perhaps that mental model we want to explore in more detail next time around when we come back to this conference.
Okay, thank you very much, Egbert. Any questions for Dr. Bermudez or Dr. Joel or Cynthia or Rachel? Any particular questions? Okay. All right, I simply then wish to, if there are no more questions at this time, I simply want to thank all the presenters for this evening. It was an enriching experience listening to the various experiences and reflections and the richness of these reflections and experiences. And my wish, and I hope it is all of our wish, to begin to deepen the connections that we have forged over these last few years through this mechanism, through this conference, and that we will begin to see more cross-border activities, cementing some of the ideas that have been presented during the last three evenings. And so I wish to thank Ms. Rachel Brunot, Cynthia Ellis, and Dr. Joel Wainwright for your presentation and sharing the experience of the women in Hopkins. Also, I wish to say thanks to Dr. Adriana Bermudez de Lorenzo for her presentation on eco-socialism and sharing us the experience of the indigenous people of not just Venezuela, but also of Peru, Ecuador, etc. And of course, I wish to say thanks to the panel, Egbert, Cynthia, Joe, and Dr. Barrett, and of course, James for your presentations. And of course, I say thanks to Renetta for introducing the speakers. I wish now to turn you over to Sister Zola for concluding remarks and any other housekeeping matters that.
We have Adrian.
Okay.
We have Adrian Martinez.
Oh yes, oh dear, how can I forget? Brother Adrian, please delight us once more with your fantastic music.
Good night to everyone. I'd love to share this original song of mine. This is a song that I did on my recent album, Changing Lanes. So I want to share this one with you all. Dalle pari yakero cielo go garati pari niki bella megerite Home agrigia hasani agrigia gibeli sani marani mati wamu maliguda pana abide tilawutinu luwadi gumegu luguya asbudire maliguda pana abide tilawutinu luwadi gumegu luguya asbudire no matter what kapasan narienga puhanya italupa metia wasira yane upo wa mama gamba ditia ani apa kate ya sosere dute nutugura bugo lidanu wenede liabi apa mutu warienganu bayanu wame oline pepa mugio barienga me onu luhami wangu honua kagamba di agi ya melu mugio maliguda panna abide tilangu tinu luwadi kumeibuyo luguya sudire maliguda pana abide tilangu tinu luwadi kumeibuyo luguya sudire a strange thing is happening in this world that is beyond our perception. When you look up into the sky, there are strange things destroying the human race. People are dying, people getting sick. The illness of this world, we have no power to stop. Don't you ask me, I know nothing about it. It's the work of the Almighty, He has the answer. Don't you ask me, I know nothing about it. It's the work of the Almighty, He has the answer. No matter what, kapasa narienga buhaya. Italupa metia wasiguro yane ubo mama gamba getia. A strange thing took hold of me the other day. It came to me in a sacred dream. A strange man came and he said to me, I want you to share these words with my lovely children. Tell them to depart from their wicked ways. Let them hear this song. I want you to share this with them. Don't you ask me, I know nothing about it. It's the work of the Almighty. He has the answer. Don't you ask me, I know nothing about it. It's the work of the Almighty. He has the answer.
Thank you very much, Adrian. We really do appreciate your music, and thank you very much for delighting our hearts. I also want to say thanks to our technician, David Brown, and Vanessa for their technical support behind the scenes. Thank you very much, and I now turn you over to Sister Zola.
Thank you very much. Yes, I want to also say thanks to Adrian for that wonderful rendition. Before I go any further, I would like to call on the president of the Garifuna Heritage Foundation, Mr. David Darky Williams, to bring closing remarks.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. I hope I'm being heard. Someone respond?
Yes, you're being heard.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Now, over the past 3 nights, or if you want to say the past 3 days, we have been delighted by a number of outstanding presentations at this, our 8th International Garifuna Conference. The conference celebrates or commemorates the 20th anniversary of the UNESCO Declaration of the Garifuna Heritage and Culture as a masterpiece of the intangible heritage of mankind. Now, most of the presentations that we heard, they offered to us practical ideas to keep this heritage that is so dear to us, this culture. The presentations offered suggestions to keep this culture vibrant and progressive and prosperous. In some of the presentations, particularly last night, the pain of Baliso reverberated and stung us once again with calls to do whatever has to be done to designate this small island a sacred site. And we have to redouble efforts to see what kind of progress could be made in that area. The presentations also serve to re-emphasize the state of what I would call hopelessness that sometimes confront indigenous peoples across the world and the continuing struggle they have to wage both against colonizers and against the colonial mindset that coexists among them. This conference, this celebration of the intangible, I hope, will soon become tangible for all of us. And with that, Mrs. Brown, I pass back to you.
All right, thank you, Darky. Brothers and sisters, friends, this conference marks the continuing work of the foundation in relation to actualizing the linkage between us here in Urume and the rest of the Garifuna diaspora. We have seen the development of the Garifuna culture and the work of the foundation come a long way over the past 20 years. I think that This conference, however, marks a new milestone because it is the first time we have ever done a virtual conference. And I'm very pleased that we have had tremendous participation from all over the world. I think that COVID provides a unique opportunity, and therefore for us, where our cultural linkages spread internationally in relation to the promotion of the Garifuna heritage and culture, it is an important step. But I also wish to state that this work is not just about the Garifuna culture. It is about reaching out to all indigenous cultures. And as we saw in the greeting segment on the first day, we received greetings from our brothers and sisters in Suriname, in Jamaica, and in other parts of the world. Because it's not just about the Caribbean either. It's about a broader and wider indigenous movement that must connect us to many of the issues that are shared across this space. And therefore, we must use every opportunity to draw from each other's strength and support one another. Clearly, there are many challenges. But for us in Yorome, being able to be here and to have this conference and also to speak to you is a reason for celebration, because as we know, this was not supposed to happen. And therefore, for us, this celebratory moment is something that we can use to give ourselves energy to carry us into the next 20 years and beyond. We have in Yorome been very fortunate that we have been able to get the support of many persons in the private and public sector, and I wish to thank them tremendously. We certainly wish to thank our collaborators, the University of the West Indies Open Campus, for all the support they have provided. We have good relationships with the Ministries of Culture, the Ministries of Education, and the Ministries of National Mobilization, which has helped us in terms of giving us resources for our work. We thank them. I think that it would not be possible to close without thanking the ancestors, and this has been a great moment because I'm sure they are smiling wherever they are, that we are able to come together over this space, and they are making this possible and facilitating our work. Clearly, many of the speakers over the past 3 days, starting with our keynote, Mr. Roy Cayetano, have been outlining practical challenges, practical steps, but also giving guidance. And it is now for us, for all of us as a collective, to translate and transform that guidance given over the past 3 days into real and considered strategies that will ensure that what we need to achieve will be achieved. And with reference to the island of Baliso, I am convinced that that is the words of Dr. Gary Denny in his presentation are very timely. Here in St. Vincent, we must see ourselves as custodians of Baliso. When our brothers and sisters from across the Garifuna diaspora visit Yorome, it is Baliso they wish to go to, and for good reason. Therefore, there is much that we need to do to ensure that that island, that sacred space, becomes a sacrament, a preserved area, and the struggle for that is not going to be easy, and we must not underestimate the forces that are aligned against us. But with all of that said, I am convinced that with the power of our ancestors and our own intellectual power, we can overcome. I want to thank all of you for joining us and to continue to do the work you are doing in your individual areas and countries and places. And we must find a way to continue to remain connected. Thank you and have a very blessed evening.
Okay, thank you, Sister Zola. And I think this brings our conference to an end. And Sister Zola, I think persons might be interested to may want to know where they can access some of the information. I don't know if you wish to say anything about that.
I would just say briefly, we in the committee, in organization, we have to review the process. And what persons can do is email us at euromayconference@gmail.com. I think Vanessa can put it in the chat, euromayconference@gmail.com. And when we have sorted ourselves out in practical terms, we will get in touch. Thank you.
Negetia, Anagawa, you to make it lencho. I give it honey, and why you know about Amurari Banegetia, Anagawa, you make it lencho. I give it honey, and why you know about Eligia, why I be